Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gun Gamers podcast. I don't actually know what number this is because I think we messed up some of our numbers recently with the whole bring the podcast down to give them a little bit of an edit and polish before re-uploading. But this is the Gun Gamers podcast with myself. I'm Eric, along with who else from Gun Gamers?
Eric.
Yeah, another Eric, not confusing. And then who's this down below us? What is your name?
6mm Mandalorian.
6mm Mandalorian. Is there a shorter name we can call you throughout the show?
You can call me Chris.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that you were good with that. But welcome to our show. If you don't know the format here, this is a bunch of airsoft nerds talking about airsoft and game design and gear and guns and ways to play the game, and I think most fascinatingly, unique games that get featured on the channel that we like to go to, that unfortunately I couldn't make the most recent one, but I'm glad that we have Chris here to talk about what are some of the games you've run this year, man? Like, what's your claim to fame here?
So really, we started with the Galactic Civil War series this year. That was actually our first game was in the fall of last year, but over the course of a year, we've ran two of those events. One down in Missouri at the Rock Airsoft, and the second one was over in Action Sports, Wisconsin. So nice. Two of those games, both obviously themed in a certain way to encourage people to dress in a galaxy far, far away attire.
Star Trek, right?
Star Trek. I think that's the word.
I just wanted to get those exclamation marks in the chat really quick.
Beat me up or something like that, right? Warp engaged. I think that's
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. That's the catchphrase, my catchphrase. So yeah, we've been doing that. That's two events in on there. We are really gearing up for the next event happening in November. And that is the Battlefront Boulevard series, which is kind of a spin-off series of what we've done with the last two events. And the first two were very, very LARP heavy events. It was open world, open sandbox. It was up to the players to decide what was happening, what was going on in that event, kind of unraveling all these threads that we put out there with story and lore and in-game economy and the character upgrade system that carries over from event to event. All of that existed in those two first games. We found the turnaround times on that was a little too short in order to really flesh out as much as we wanted to with these kind of games, because it takes a lot of planning, a lot of scheming, a lot of coordination with NPC players, and really gives you basically a year to build the hype around the next full LARP event. So with that being said, we've added in that additional game, which is the Battlefront Boulevard, which is down in Boulevard, Missouri. And we're working with Skirmish, which is a company that is a mesh. They're basically a mesh system for tactical games, right? So you have capture points. You have different objectives you can do with the system, all using radio frequencies, basically. Each player has their own radio frequency chip that they get at the check-in, and they're able to capture bases using that and turn it to their faction, and you can monitor it in real time. So we've been working with them to get this fully operational for Battlefront Boulevard because we wanted the game to feel
a fully operational battle system.
Fully operational. We wanted the whole thing to feel like you're playing Battlefront, like on your Xbox or whatever, where the capture points. We didn't get to the point where we have the full. The Baptist station has been captured. Point C is under attack. Like that. That isn't completely in the works yet, but that's all
what
stuff
you need is just somebody on each team's comms with those loaded up into a soundboard, and then they can just play it as they're watching.
Don't even think we haven't thought about just sitting somebody down. It's like, all right, who's injured and who just wants to just sit and relay this information over camp. So like the one guy he'd be sitting there. Not even a soundboard. He has to do it all manually. He has to do the whole voice.
Oh, yeah, just be the guy.
He has to do his Imperial voice when he's talking for the Imperials and switch over to the Rebels.
Oh, my God. That is a great idea, and you should totally do it.
We should. We'll
Just
find
watches.
that. We'll, if we don't have anybody that's injured, we'll make sure we get one, and we'll put them right on the task.
Well, so how long is the format for this game? Like what's the basics in terms of like, you know, are there rotations? Is it continuous? What's the format?
So let's kind of talk. We'll talk about the past again real quick to give a little broad overview of where we're coming from and where the next event is going to be, and then the one after that as well, because we have a date for that too in a location. So the first event was not an all-day event, but it basically ran from like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So you had about 8 hours of solid, non-interrupted gameplay. From there, we took a break until it got dark out, and then we restricted the AO to like the center town area, and we redivided people up. And this wasn't really like part of the game in terms of storyline and character building and credit earning. This was really just to get people out at night to shoot each other with tracers and stuff.
Well, so, yeah, I mean, that's part of the fun of this, right?
Gotta have it. So we did that mainly because the AO, so the rock, is an old quarry. So there are dangers there during the daylight for just operating around that AO. You know, you take a wrong turn, you fall down a 50-foot cliff, that kind of stuff.
We've hosted at some sketchy facilities ourselves. We know all too well working around those limitations.
Yeah, so we were able to at least work with the rock and get that night game for the rock set up, and it worked really well. Everyone had fun. We broke out. I had a Vader costume that I broke out for that night event, and I just went around just massacring anybody. Like Imperials, you deliberately disobeyed me. You know, just angry at my own troops, just slaughtering them for funsies. You know, nothing's better than having a bunch of grown men screaming at night when you pop out of a corner and you ignite your lightsaber up as Vader. You know, it's just a joy that you can't experience. Yeah, exactly. You know, I was running around and I was like covering up my blinking lights on my Vader, and I was pulling my cape over me so you couldn't see any of the lights on my chest and stuff. But yeah, so that was the first game. Second game, we ran continuous. It was like 30 hours straight continuous Star Wars Airsoft LARP.
That's the one you ran in Wisconsin?
Yeah, that was at Action Sports Wisconsin, yeah.
What a cool facility that is, by the way. I do love that place, like, to play. I want to go back there just to play.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite places. Like, I mean, I call it my local field, but man, like, you know, they have you guys hosted out there, AMS hosts out there. It's just a really nice field, and they put a lot of thought into the development of it as they keep growing every year, which I love to see.
I also just really like Chris. That helps.
No, Chris is the worst. He's
He's
the worst. That guy sucks. Chris, if you're watching, I'm sorry. We didn't sign a contract yet for next year, so I'm sorry. So yeah, the second installment still continues play. We're going to tweak that up a little bit so we have a little bit better timing with the flow of the event, because we had, you know, a little over 100 people out there, and we started at 10 and we just went continuously, and we just kept driving story and driving missions.
Parts.
Yeah. And by like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, there was probably only like 10 people conscious on the field at that point. So we did have some really fun night missions. We did a deal where, if you guys have ever watched Andor, they have those prisoner costumes that they're all wearing when they're in prison, the white jumpsuits with the yellow highlights on them.
Yep.
And we had a night mission, which actually brought up probably 20 participants for that, where we had 10 of these prisoners who had escaped from a prisoner transport, and it was both faction's job to return them to their respective areas. So they had to like go track them down, either get them to come with them willingly, or they had to like, you know, shoot them, revive them, and then drag them back to their base kind of deal. And that went for about an hour or so. Actually, to my knowledge, I didn't know this happened, but it actually continued because one of the prisoners never got caught. So that prisoner had like found a nice little hidey hole in the map, and he curled up to hide, and then he fell asleep. So then it was like 5-6 hours later, he wakes up. He's like, "What the?"
Man.
Nobody caught him. He was one of our admins, and so he was like the guy who was in charge of the NPCs and everything like that. So he got going early in the morning because he rolled that character he was playing into a bigger character for the beginning of the day, which was still that he was this high-profile rebel who had escaped, and he was like helped leading the charge against the Imperials the next day, and he had like one of the rifles that we have, the NT-242s, which are just like the Barrett 50 cals with a fancy laser system on it. And he had one of those that he was using against the Juggernauts like the whole beginning of the day until he could get captured or killed. So it was a fun little way to just keep it going. So, but for timing and everything, with the next series events, we're definitely going to pace ourselves at the live one and let people explore more things. Is the big part. And then the second part of it is we are kind of changing the way we have our faction set up. So originally you could sign up as like a Mandalorian and be part of the Mandalorian clan, or you could be an outlaw and work for, Han Solo or, whatever high profile outlaw was at the event there. Or you could be a rebel or you could be Imperial. We're kind of scraping out those two side factions, and we're just calling everything unaffiliated. So what we're doing with that,
you're trying to give people more character freedom, where rather than like signing up for one side, it's like, oh, now I'm always stuck with this side regardless of like what I think my character can do. It opens up more role play opportunities, and that also makes it a more dangerous game.
Exactly, because you'd have either Mandalorians who weren't necessarily sticking to the creed of what our Mandalorian clan was, and they're like, well, we don't really have any repercussions with you like going off and killing people when you're not supposed to be or not following orders. So like there isn't anything to really threaten you with besides we're not going to pay you anymore. So then they just wander off and try to do other things, which I want to happen now because I want people to make their decisions. We want their decisions to matter and what they're doing on the map. We want them to create alliances and build up trust, and you build that over an event before you completely stab someone in the back.
Yeah, that takes advantage completely of the sandbox that you're trying to create. Make an open world without the types of guidelines of how each faction has to run.
Yeah. And go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say, and the other thing too is, I think having that type of sandbox makes a lot of sense as well with the very like recurring character system that you've got, because then it stacks on top of like your freedom to continue to develop a character. And now it's not like, oh, well, I want to play the other side, I got to bail on my other character that's like stuck on this faction. Now you can kind of see where you want to take things.
Yeah. So there still is very much the rebel and the Imperial aspect of it. And they are what we are going to call more of your milsim experience, where you're locked into that faction the whole event. There could be some repercussions for not following chain of command or whatever. But as far as like the people who are doing that, they want to have that experience. They want to go on missions where they're scouting and they're having more of that combat driven experience where they're fighting over certain resources or fighting over certain things in the wild. And they, you always have the kind of hatred between the rebel and the Imperial, but when they're in town, is it the right time to try to kill that other squad of guys that are walking around, or should we let them go? Or like even with the rebels, where they have to they want to bring like a change of clothes that isn't as rebelly. So when they go into town, they're not going to be a straight up target, opposed to when they got their full like rebel marine costume on. That's like, oh yeah, that dude is definitely a rebel. So playing in those realms
about all of that too is like, think of something more milsim than like the Imperial Army in Star Wars, right? It's probably the most like fascistic, organized military possible. What you should do is you should get like a couple of members of Milsim West cadre to come guest command for the Imperials and have them really run people through like those kinds of experiences. One of our regular viewers here, Ho Ching Jung, though, has a quick question for us. What are we drinking tonight, everybody?
I've got a apple bourbon and Coke that I'm working on through a straw here.
I've
It's
got a
going down pretty
Guinness.
good.
Guinness is very classic. Can't go wrong.
I was in a rush to find my coiled up, wrinkled headphones, so actually I grabbed nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Other Eric is slacking here.
I am.
Whoa.
And then we have another comment right here from Ye Cray, who says it's hilarious when the factions team up. Wolf Cola and Dole Bananas was the funniest combo faction civ shit that they saw at Milsim West. Yeah, I mean that's what we're talking about, right? Is the freedom to like really make your own experience, which I feel like airsofters have not really been given a ton of opportunities for in the past, especially like I don't know, maybe I'm projecting, but especially out in the Midwest, I feel like really LARP heavy stuff is kind of new out there.
Yeah, for sure. Building that up from the ground, because I would say maybe 90% of our players have never tried to do an event like we've done. We've had some that have done like Milsim West, so they get the idea of like getting into your character and like
totally
getting
different
into your
context,
faction.
but
Yeah, exactly. But even with like ours, which is very much a themed event, that's pretty new to the area. There's been some like Fallout stuff that has been done before and some other things like that. But we've kind of really stuck to our guns to what we want an event to be and we want the event to feel like. And it's only going to keep building over the years.
Yeah, well, that's the thing where like you figure out what works well as a system one way, and then you just that's set. Then you can systemize more things. And one of the things I think is really interesting that you mentioned, like with your next event, Bolivar. The fascinating thing I see about that is all the ways that you've systemized combat in a way that feels very Star Wars. So it's not just a Star Wars skin on a very standard game. It feels like every mechanic has been very carefully. I'm sorry, I'm probably saying the word I shouldn't say, but every mechanic feels like that style.
Yeah, and that's when we're designing the very ground up from the game is like, okay, what do we want all of the rules that we're kind of familiar with in Airsoft? Whether it's medic system or hit system, and how can we grow it and build upon that? So like one of the big upgrades that you can get for your character without like getting any in-game economy is basically what you're wearing. So if you come to the event and you're in a full Mandalorian costume, you basically have to take 3 consecutive hits to take you down. And then like a full armored stormtrooper, we have our self-revive system. So if you get knocked down and put into bleed out, if you are fully armored as a stormtrooper and you have enough pieces, essentially you of Plastoid, you have a 1 minute. It's 1 minute, and you can get back up and start fighting again. As long as an enemy player doesn't come over and touch you, or what we like to say in the business, thermal detonators solve all problems. If a thermal detonator goes off next to you, you're done, kind of deal. If you're a stormtrooper and you're running around and a thermal detonator goes off next to you, you get knocked down, but you do not get your self-revive. So thermal detonators do solve a lot of problems in Airsoft, and that's kind of one thing we wanted to have is a little bit of balance around these powers and these abilities. Same thing with a Mandalorian. If a thermal detonator goes off next to you, you're done too. But there are certain things you can do and get, whether it's a medical droid that you have attached to you that you've bought with credits that can give you that same self-revive power. But as was kind of mentioned before, wearing a costume like this, like in normal airsoft experience, when I go to a normal field on a regular weekend and I've got this get up, yeah, people look at me, they're like, oh, that's awesome. Oh, I don't want to play against that guy. He looks so badass. But I'm like, I've got like an extra 100 pounds of gear on. My peripherals is pretty limited. like, I know you guys are hyping me up and I love it right now, but let's get serious. Like I'm gonna get killed a lot out there. But it's for fun. So that's what it is. And the amount of joy a kid gets on his face when he kills a Mandalorian, oh man, he's gonna be talking about that to his friends all weekend long. Oh guys, I killed that Mandalorian guy. I got up behind him. He had no idea. I'm like, I had no idea.
It sounds to
Absolutely
me
delighted.
like, your enjoyment of airsoft is a lot less in the traditional, like, semi-military, I want to min-max airsoft, like, and really play in like a military costume. Like, you're a lot more like what I feel comfortable using this word. It's our word too. You're a lot more of a LARPer, right? Like, it's a lot more about like the experience of having these different games that you go to, and they've got their advantages and disadvantages, but then you're also able to build the systems with your games where you really look for people to buy into the LARP. Because obviously things like self-revive and complicated armor rules and whatnot, those kind of suck for normal airsoft games, but I don't see what you're doing as entirely traditional normal airsoft game, which I think is a cool development to see, where you kind of demand that level of player buy-in and then you reward it with the immersive experience that those players are looking for.
Yeah, and I think having the rewarding the commitment in people building up their Imperial armor or their Mandalorian armor to get those types of rewards is a nice benefit for putting in that work to the costume. But because the costume is what it is, it also stands out that these specific things in people are what gets that rewards, rather than other weird amorphous, probably convoluted rules inside Milsim of trying to reward armor and things like that. Like an Imperial,
that's
soldier is explicitly an Imperial soldier.
And that's the really big thing about that is you have such huge visual cues that I think 95% of humanity understands what a Mandalorian looks like versus a stormtrooper or like a mud trooper or just like a plastoid looking dude. And that helps us a lot because we can just lean into things that have already existed in media and are able to just show people, be like, this thing that you've watched for the last 20 years, this is how that works, And the same thing goes along with, like, we have a rule: if there's any distinctly non-human characters, they gain the same kind of treatment as a Mandalorian. So the additional 3 hits before they go down. So if you got a guy out there in a Wookiee suit, or you got somebody rocking, green skin and the Twi'lek Lyku dangling down their back, they get the same thing because it's torture to wear in a combat environment, because there's a reason people don't do it, or the reason that cosplayers really haven't dug into it before is because it's not easy. It's hot. It's obscene. It's obtrusive. It gets in the way of your combat, but we try to reward in some combat capacity what you are taking away from being able to move freely or being able to easily crawl around on the ground, or for me, like, it takes like 100% more effort to try to sneak somewhere when I'm wearing all the armor and everything's not clunking together. So there's different gameplay balance aspects to everything that kind of tying together, and it's just worked so far.
Well, and I'm also like, I'm a big guy, and I'm a lot harder to hit than you in like a normal airsoft game setting, right? Like, I'm probably wearing a chest rig and a field top, and I can go prone and run around and do whatever. You're wearing a Mandalorian costume that you can barely take a knee in, like, so. You gain the advantages, but there's also the disadvantages, and this actually ties into a point in the chat that I kind of want to engage a little bit, is about cheaters. Like, the more systems a game has, like, the more it kind of opens the door for cheating. But I think what you have to look to for that is almost the tabletop game design of, well, basically the dice roll is the dice roll, and you just have to accept the result and roll with winning and losing as part of the experience. I hate to say it, but it's about the maturity of the player that comes out in the audience. And I think having that level of buy-in for players to come in with, hey, you get all these systems if, like, you can do all the costuming work and you can, like, show up and read the rule set and understand what's going on. I think that kind of gatekeeps those systems a little bit, hopefully, to where people aren't going to be inclined to try to take advantage of them as much in terms of, oh, I'm going to cheat blatantly and just use these systems to mask for that. I think those people want to buy into the format and see what those systems do. I mean,
You
obviously
gotta
there's
hope.
the potential for cheaters, but you almost have to accept that might happen as well. It's weird.
It might, but you got to hope that if somebody's going to put the investment into that type of a game, that they're there to play it the way it's intended to be played. Like, you got to hope that that effort.
Well, and what's your experience been with that,
Watch
Chris?
that
Like, I feel like we should ask the guy who's been to all the games.
Who's been all there, and who's been the one that has to deal with anything that comes up? It's actually been amazing in comparison to other events, and I'll give a couple reasons why. Number one, what Eric number one was alluding to was that people who are there are there to be invested into that kind of world, to do that kind of game. There's very little people that go there and have no idea what the game is about, what they're doing that weekend, what the theme of everything is. At an event like this, there's so much buying you have to do before you even try to like buy your ticket. You know, you have to commit to your uniform, your class, your all sorts of little hoops that you're jumping through for you to invest in you being there. Secondly, we have the progressive character upgrade system / progressive credit system. So the ability to earn money and progress your character throughout the event is something that you really don't have when it comes to just a regular game. Because if I go to an event and I'm cheating there, I can lose the ability to, say, participate in, the rest of the game or whatever. And then you come to the next event and you're at square one again with everybody else. We have the ability to strip away everybody's achievements. So if there's somebody that has they've been playing for an event or two and we're starting to notice a pattern with cheating in that player, we have the ability to go up to them, warn them like we do at normal events. Hey, you're going to get banned. Hey, you're going to get barred. But then we can also throw other things at them like, hey, you're going to lose all your character progression if you keep doing this, or we're going to have to put a rep on you and have you monitored for the rest of this. And if we notice anything, you're going to get banned from the series, which, not that other companies can't ban a person from an event, but there's obviously a lot of investment in order to do this. And so think of a player who has put together a Mandalorian outfit. They've sanded this thing, they polished it for months on end to get this thing primed, ready to go, and they put this together only to play at the Star Wars Airsoft event. And now there's the possibility of them
you get banned from that,
not being able to do all the that is just always in your head, and it will always just can get stripped away from you. So
that would be
we haven't even had to come close to that at any of our events. It's the same thing that you'd have at any game you go to. Hey, I was shooting this guy, he didn't feel his hit. Like, what's going on? Our thing is just keep shooting until they call their hit. If you have an issue and they're not calling your hits, track down an admin. We'll start looking at it. Like, don't deal with the situation yourself. Luckily, with our event, even when you're dealing with the leagues of mud troopers that we had at the last event, it's still pretty easy to identify a person going on, because it's like, oh, it was this particular Mandalorian who had his helmet like this, and this was his coloration, versus, it was the guy wearing multicam. He's being a jerk.
You have a lot less opportunity to be anonymous at your games, and losing all your achievements is a massive cost of your time. And putting that in there, there's a lot of risk in being a cheater to that.
Well, and also, it's not. I feel like it's not what people sign up for. Your events. Seeing the change up from the LARP style event to like the almost more force on force style event. What I find really fascinating is how consistent the aesthetic is. And I actually I was looking at your video that you had with the skirmish system. And one of the things that struck me is how strikingly on brand that looked too. So I think one of the things I've learned recently with like D&D, right, is role play doesn't stop when combat starts. So I think you guys are like really pulling off a real version of that as well, where you're still role playing and buying into the aesthetic and, carrying all of that character action into the combat, whether that be the combat rotations, the more LARP heavy stuff, or the combat at your new combat heavy game. So I would anticipate that even at like something where the shooting is more the point, you'll still probably have people buying into those combat systems pretty well.
Yeah. And that's the nice thing with what we've developed is our rule set is basically copy pasted from event to event in terms of the class that you're picking, the ability to earn money, to buy upgrades, like all of that continues through. It's just the style of the game that we're playing is changing. The base rules and the base format and you know what we do with the character upgrade system, that all exists in this other version of the game. It's just a much more copy paste thing that we can use. And really, we're going to be trying to use it as a way to either go test out a new field, or maybe we want to go to the East Coast someday and play at a field over there. You know, the amount of stuff you have to bring to a LARP and, you know, set up the tables for sabacc and the cantina and the food and all this stuff. You know, right now where we're at, we can't necessarily, you know, do a 20-hour trek across the country or 40-hour trek across the country, dragging all this stuff with us to do the big LARP. Might be in a couple years or so, but at least it gives us a way to be like, okay, we don't have anything for spring this year, so let's go ahead and see if there's a one-day event that we can do somewhere further east or further west, where it could be, you know, just loading up some stuff and getting it out there versus loading up a trailer and a half of stuff to get it out to an event.
It's so interesting to me that you guys started like the opposite of how we started, because you know we obviously have like made our bread and butter on our 12-hour format, and you know the one-day games that are very force-on-force, combat heavy, and I view that as the foundational research of us having a combat system to plug into more LARP-oriented stuff down the road. But you guys took, oh, well, we really want to do the LARP first, and now you're turning that into a combat system. It's funny how, you know, convergent the paths are in a weird way.
Definitely. Yeah, that's you know, for us, that was always the bigger function of it is like, okay, it's got to be kind of like a LARP because we want that experience of, you know, the Rebels, the Empire, the Mandalorians, like all that jive to it. I think we've seen enough iterations of like Star Wars games that were very much focused on combat to begin with, and it just ended up being the names being thrown around and not a lot of people like buying into the full aspect of the event. So hopefully we're providing that sandbox for them to grow in at the LARP events, and then at the Battlefront series, it gives the people that are more in tune with, hey, I like dressing up in Star Wars costumes, but I also like shooting people with my airsoft gun. But they don't necessarily know if they'll like the LARP aspect of it, because that's what the original events, the signature series to our events, they need. You need to want to LARP, you need to want to shoot people with your BB guns, and you need to want to dress up. And those three things are kind of hard to try to get buy-in from any community. It's a hard trifecta to get, even if you're dealing with like someone who's 501st and they love the cosplay aspect of it, and they'd love to role play, but God, they don't really know if they'd like to be part of like the shooting and stuff yet. So it's kind of a way to kind of try to pull from both with the two different events.
Well, and to be honest, if somebody from like the 501st just hopped both feet into like the internet airsoft community as well, man, sometimes it would probably be hard to get them to want to stay.
You know, we have a couple that really did that, but they dipped their toes into the NPC roles before anything else. They didn't want to do like the full-time shooting. Like they wanted to run the shops, or they wanted to like help in the cantina, or they wanted to help do these other things that weren't as combat active. But you know, in our Discord now, they're the ones who are like, all right, here's all the stuff that I'm going to bring to the next event, and I'm going to be playing more of a rebel trooper, and I'm going to like do this, and you see them get the buy-in. They understand what an event feels like and it plays like. So hopefully we can keep pulling from all sides of the community.
At the same time, though, I mean, the cosplayers and that help introduce the people who aren't that aware or that deep into LARP what the LARP aspects are, how to kind of think on their feet and improvise more than they would in a regular game where you just shoot at somebody and move on to the next person you're shooting at.
Well, and what
So,
I've observed,
You can
is that,
what
have
one
one
side
observed
teach the
as
other.
well is that more LARP heavy games really get people outside of airsoft into airsoft. I mean, a lot of people I talk to, their first fucking airsoft game is a Milsim West, weirdly enough. But then there was Survive
And
Omega. You remember Omega.
Yeah.
How many people came to Omega who had never been camping?
I think I would even say a quarter of like anybody I've seen at Perdition or Desolation 3 were brand new to this in general. Airsoft, LARPing, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really fascinated, and I'm sure you've probably seen stuff like this, Chris. I mean, you're saying you've got guys coming in who are, not really into the airsoft thing, but then they come out and they experience the LARP aspect, and then they get more into, the combat aspect as well. And I think people are kind of scared of airsoft initially when all they see of it is the, what you see on YouTube, right? Like the burn my patch and all that crap.
Yeah.
But then you see a totally different side of it and a totally different potential where it's like, wait a minute, this isn't like going to a local field and having a bunch of kids light me up at 50 RPS. This is like going out and getting to do a real game, like something that's really unique, organized theater almost.
Yeah. And act out your passion for what you put your investment into the costume that you're doing.
Yeah. And, as we keep doing these events and more of the airsoft community can see what we're doing, I know we're going to get more people pulled in and interested in that avenue. But one of the biggest things that we've noticed is, okay, we're pulling from a community that already exists. How can we pull more people from a non-airsoft side of the series into our games, into the hobby? Because that's the biggest way to grow the sport in general, the hobby, whatever you want to call it. That's the biggest way to grow it, is to bring in new players to it. And I would say probably 50% of the people that we're getting out these days, like they either only played in their backyard or they have never owned an airsoft gun before in their life, and they're like fully committing to all of the things that are happening in Galactic Civil War.
Yeah. It's so cool to see, because I've long held like the opinion that airsoft and just general nerd stuff, the crossover is a circle, right? Like the Venn diagram is a circle, I should say. And seeing more and more diversity of events as well has been really cool. Like obviously, with what GGP is doing, we're in like a pseudo fake military type of force on force conflict right now. We've got other stuff we want to do that's going to lean in other directions, but it's all pretty grounded. I think taking airsoft and going and like the series that you're doing and really embracing like a totally fantastical aesthetic also increases that buy-in to make all the mechanics work.
Yeah, I was going to say, just looking at the pictures from the game that you posted in Wisconsin, I was pretty impressed with the general cosplay of the people involved. Like, I mean, I wasn't 100% sure what to expect out of it. And I'm looking at people dressed up in, Imperial officer gear, and people dressed up like the Rebels and whatnot, and other Mandalorians. Like, I was really impressed with that initial buy-in for, I think what you said was your second event.
Yeah, for the second. And I would say, the cosplay probably increased 50% from the last event. So, and we didn't have a lot of overlapping players either. It was probably only 25% repeat players from the first event that came from wherever they're coming from.
That's cool.
The rest of them were all new to it. So we're really excited to just keep growing in all areas, because, people have stuff that comes up and they can't attend the event, and they're just super excited about the next year's event or the next year's thing. So yeah, we have the Battlefront Boulevard coming up, and that one is it's a shorter. It's still a 2-day event series, but we're doing basically 2-hour combat rounds, and we're doing like a 1-hour break in between. So you still can sign up for Imperials, you can sign up for Rebels, or you can sign up for the unaffiliated. And the unaffiliated are the ones that have all sorts of random costumes that don't look either Imperial or Rebel. And in between each match, we divide that unaffiliated player base up to make up for whichever team needs more players, or if they have a certain number of people sitting out one game, we can fill in more unaffiliated players to aid that faction as sort of mercenaries for that round. But that will give the players, a better timing in terms of, okay, we got 2 hours of hot combat. Now we can go back, relax at the cantina, gamble some credits we earned at the last round before the next game comes in, reload, get ready to go, and do it again. So we got like three of those combat rounds the first day before we take the break, and then we do that again, that night combat. We are requiring tracers. You have to have a tracer in order to play the night game. So we took that leap before. We had like some flashlights, so you have to have a flashlight on while you're shooting. We have gone to, and we've made the leap to, you just got to have a tracer on your weapon if you're playing at the night game. It's a Star Wars event. You just got to do it.
Tracers are good enough now. Like, it's not like crappy tracer units of the past, right? Where they always broke and they were pieces of garbage. Yeah. Now there's like, all right, no excuse, get a tracer.
Yep. So we're really excited about that because we get to, in this kind of sandbox too, we get to try out different things. So like the skirmish system, which is exactly what we wanted to do the Battlefront series, a way to easily have contested control spots that are being taken care of by a system and not having to have an admin at each capture area or each capture post who's like radioing in what's happening, or if someone's earned something and then somebody else tallying it up. The system is doing that all in real time, and the coolest part is those players can pull up their phone. They can see exactly which control points at that moment are which factions, so they know, hey, this one's under attack. We got 10 minutes before that flips, or hey, this one's under attack. It's got 2 minutes before it flips. And we have some other dynamics that are tied into that with our own rule set. So the skirmish system, how that works, if you go to a capture and contest a point, you scan your band. As admins, we have the ability to set the value. So let's say it takes 10 minutes for a command post to get captured. If I go up there and I'm attacking that command post, no one's there, I scan my wristband. I've got 10 minutes before it flips to my team, and then my team starts getting points for it. The second part of that, as admins, as we can do, as we set up before the game starts, is we could have it worth 25% reduction in time for every teammate who scans their band too. So if I have a 5-person squad, I can go scan my band, and then the other 4 people can scan their band, and then that instantly flips that capture point over to my teams. So it promotes not just like lone wolf players sneaking around to try to go take a command post.
It rewards squad play.
But you still have to push for that squad play.
Well, and even if like a lone wolf player gets to a command point, like, they can scan in, but then it's going to take them 10 minutes to capture it. So that then rewards, the other players to come in, reinforce that position, and hold it.
So that's a really fun aspect of that design. So you can push more squad-based team play. And the second part of that, so like one of our classes we have as it's we call it now. We've changed the kind of combined 2 together. So before we had a smuggler class, and then we had a tech class. So smugglers could like conceal loot and do stuff like that, and like hide lootable items on their person that no one could get to unless another enemy was a smuggler and they were looting you. In the next event and going forward, we've combined that with the tech class, which was the class that has the ability to like repair juggernauts and repair vehicles and repair command posts, and can in certain scenarios they can like decipher things. So there's a whole code system that we use at our event. So either unlocking things or like gaining intel off of certain points, they have to take their little cipher wheel, go there, and decode the message on
the decoder ring.
That's
the decoder ring.
Drink your Ovaltine.
There's something about Ovaltine, yes. God damn it! It's a crummy commercial.
Well, I think there's a lot of interesting things that you've been doing, like with the wristbands, like using the technology in ways that I haven't really seen embraced inside the game before either. Knowing, I have 10 minutes to get this control point, so now I've added a sense of urgency into the game, like Eric pointed out, creating squad cooperation. I think your Juggernaut system has a hit system where the light bar goes down. The radio trackers like Mando's bounty tracking thing. What other ways are you using technology for building up your games?
Yeah, so one of the aspects that we're kind of just talking about was this. It's the new operative class. So it's the combination of the smuggler and the tech, and he's got the little code decoding message. But at the next event, it's not as demanding for that role. There'll still be like side missions and side quests that will kind of get funneled onto the field during the event. So they're still used for some of their like LARPy skills that they gain. But the other big thing is they essentially they're worth 2 players with their scan in. So if I am a operative, or it's a operative / scoundrel, you're either an operative or you're a scoundrel. You can choose which one you want to call yourself. More so operative for your Imperials or your
Scoundrel
rebels.
sounds cooler.
Scoundrel's
though,
cool.
I mean,
Scoundrel sounds
obviously.
cooler. But
Scruffy nerf herder.
when you're like all did up as like a Imperial ISB agent, you're like, I'm not. Scoundrel really isn't my vibe. Then you're an operative, right? So that's your deal. So they're worth 2 players at those capture command posts, so they can flip command posts faster than a normal player can. So they have the ability to like reduce that time down. So that's like using the technology system within the class distinction. So they have this kind of little flavor to their class for the skirmish system on top of the other LARP stuff. Because we've also, on top of all the things that they had, we put a restriction on the kind of weapons they can use. So they can only use pistols. So they can use blaster pistols. That's it. So if you want this like techie kind of like rogue class, you got dual-wielding pistols and stuff. Well, now you are locked to those pistols. You can't be carrying around your big heavy repeater blaster and then going and decoding something. So it gives like that vibe to that character to give it more of a personality. And then on the flip side of that is if you are a player, maybe you're a new player to airsoft at all, your budget isn't there, and you can only afford to have a blaster pistol. Well, you have an edge to your character that other people don't have, even though you're only bringing a blaster pistol out to combat. So
I would honestly, I would almost say for that, like make it where the class is like just instant capture. Because then that really encourages like almost not non-combat play, I should say, but like support play. Because now you could have it where just a couple of people could basically just escort a tech around. And as long as one person survives with that tech to keep them safe, you can just scan in and capture the point.
Yeah, that's one thing that Skirmish is definitely looking at doing, because their system is not as set up for what we want to do in the long run.
Gotcha.
But it's very new in terms of all the things that they're building. I mean, they're building like bombs that you can activate with it. You know, the different command posts can be different things like respawn areas, and you know, they could be counted as a resource point. So, you know, at our LARP events, one of those areas could be a mine, and anytime a unique scan code scans that area, it's counted as, you know, they're either mining something or they're doing something, so it's gaining points for that faction. So you're kind of like cycling through people throughout the field. But he's also very excited to work with us because we have such bonker ideas and bonker things that we want to try that he's like, I haven't even really thought about trying to do anything like that. I mean, like one of the things is like our upgrade system. Like, can we get that all integrated into the skirmish system? So now we don't have these cards that we're punching and keeping track of stuff. Now it's all on the skirmish mesh system. And as you scan that, like we can see what your upgrades are, and you know the admins would have to have a way to interact with that. But this is all stuff that we're kind of looking at and building together now that we're partnering with each other for stuff like this.
I wonder how hard it would be for Skirmish to build like you know how arcade cabinets used to have dip switches, right?
Yeah.
like where you could just change a couple values, like with just a few things. I wonder if there would be a way for Skirmish to have like a dip switch menu, essentially, where you can just adjust values for things on the fly if you wanted to like use their system as a basis for things.
Yeah, and I mean that's very much a way that it's set up. So I was throwing out some values like 25% is this thing, 10 minutes is this thing. Like that's all stuff that can get changed.
Okay.
The biggest thing is like the unique identity of, so like when I'm saying, you know, the operative smuggler,
essentially you have a different dip switch value for some classes than others.
That doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
The only thing that we are utilizing is they essentially have two bands or two radio frequencies that they scan instead of having one that's worth twice as much. So that's all the kind of stuff that we're kind of looking at is like, can we build that? Can like they like,
can you like save a profile of a dip switch value, like setting, like all of them set to whatever you want for the class, and just save that profile and then basically apply that profile selectively.
Sure.
But then how's it going to work? I don't know the technological back end. It's just I'm speculating.
Yeah, no, that's the big thing, because the skirmish system is at all these other fields all across the country. So having that unique profile for just our rule set, you know, we're not that big yet. We're not pulling in
you're gonna have some on the field running their open play, and all of a sudden everything's messed up because somebody picked the Star Wars class.
Yeah. So it's all, but that's all kind of stuff that we talked about is like unique identities, unique classes, like how they interact in the skirmish system. Like, do we ever want to dabble with like electronic currency or anything like that for banking your currency if we ever go the route of currency being lootable or whatever? So that's all stuff we've kind of looked at. And at the time, it's just like, okay, let's just make sure it fits with everything we're doing before, you know, we both start investing more in each other.
Well, you gotta
just a really good fit.
You gotta play your system through a little bit before you put that much time and commitment into the actual programming of it. So even if for right now you have the two wristbands, it's a proof of concept.
Yeah. And
then you can work towards creating those profiles to make the wristband actually be worth the value of two instead. So there's, for going into your third game, I mean, I gotta say I'm pretty impressed with the variety of ideas and classes and the thought put into all of that.
Oh, we haven't even talked about the most exciting thing that I think Eric's gonna love.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
I think Eric 1 and Eric 2. They're both of them are gonna flip over this. So let's foreshadow to past Battlefront Boulevard. We're gonna look at the next unnamed event, because you got to come up with a really cool name. The first one was Survivor's Endeavor. Oh, that sounds cool. Next one, Ambition's Toll. Forget about it. So cool. So the third one got to come with, or the fourth iteration of the game, or the third LARP event. We're still narrowing down the name to get the coolest sounding name. But it is a continuation of the story on Mauston 3. The Imperials have done really well with their Dark Trooper program, but it has been stunted because the assistant director had basically gotten captured and take off world, so they only got so far with their Dark Trooper program. But since that time, the Imperials have essentially taken over the local town. They've taken over basically the map, right? They own the area because the rebels kind of got pushed off the map. The Mandalorians got pushed out of town. So they own the whole thing. So the Imperials, it's going to be a lot more of a policing / investigation / doing their mil-simi events off in the woods to take capture points and stuff. But for them, there is the element of the unaffiliated players, right? So you're going to have people inhabiting this town that are unaffiliated, and we're introducing a heat system to basically get in consequences for the criminal side of the world. So players who have chosen to go to a life of crime, whether they're doing thievery, moving spice, different activities that are flagged as criminal, most every single person on the field will know what they're doing is criminal if they're doing it. But you will have say you complete your mission, you've smuggled some spice from one part of the field to the other part of the field, you've come back to the hideout, and now you're getting paid for your action. You roll a chance cube, and if you roll a red on the chance cube, then you've accumulated heat. So what that does is now your character is flagged with a bounty. So that person is a wanted man. So that plays into the second part of it, which is the Bounty Hunters Guild. So we've had bounty hunters at previous events, but now you have bounty hunters that are particularly looking at trying to bring in people who have heat on them.
Oh, damn, so, I just went 5 stars in GTA.
Exactly. That is exactly what it is.
Oh, no.
So the basically the heat is you gain a orange armband or leg band based on how much heat you've gained. So once you have 4 bands, you have one on your leg, one on your other, one on your arm, one on the other arm. Essentially, you're worth like 400 credits at that point. So then players who have opted in to buy a bounty hunter license are able to try to bring you in. So bounty hunters can try to go after people that have the heat system or they have accumulated a bounty on them. Once you get to your 4th band, though, that is when you will earn a tracking fob, and that is when those players will actively be tracking your location to make your life a living hell. So, once you get brought in, you have the option to either pay in credits and pay off your bounty, or you are basically drafted into one of the factions as a mercenary for an amount of time. So you might have an hour sentence to go as a mercenary to help the rebels in order to let your heat die down. And then once you've done that, you can get back to the normal game of what you wanted to do. So as you go, like, enlist with the rebels for an hour, there's only one NPC who's in charge of, like, okay, where are these players going if they're being brought in? And they have heat on them. So we can use that as a balance function of the kind of milsim that's happening in the background. So if the Imperials are doing really good, we'll start feeding the rebels some players as they either are trying. Yeah. So as exactly. So say if Eric wants to like go volunteer to be a mercenary for the rebels for a little bit, and he's got like 4 heat on him, and he's just doing this for funsies. He can go do that and let his heat die down, and then come back to the game and not have to worry about losing credits if he's being brought in. The second function of the heat is that is also an indication of your notoriety as well. So the more heat you have on you, the bigger and more expensive jobs you can pull off or try to pull off. So it is an indication to our NPCs, whether they're the Pikes, whether they're the Hutts, whether they're all these different outlaw factions.
Like, oh, you're a badass. You got all this heat on you.
Yeah, you're building some infamy on you.
So then, that makes those people who are, doing a really good job at stealing shit and smuggling stuff and doing this stuff, it gives them, it's a passive way to slow them down. I guess it's not really passive. It's very active. It's an active way to slow them down from doing their stuff, because now they have to sneak. Now they have to like be wary.
I want to see somebody show up with just a whole like squad size element, like 10 or 12 guys, and just call themselves the Hot Boys, and just acquire as much heat as possible, but just be absolutely ruthless in combat.
Yes. Yes.
See, like be the final boss of what the bounty hunters have to come after.
Yeah. So yeah, you have the aspect of all this heat and everything. The other side of the unaffiliated players is those players also will have to pay for their respawns at a central location. So if you have a bunch of unaffiliated players, whether they're bounty hunters or just random Mandalorians, or maybe they're a bunch of outlaw gangs members, or just maybe a dude who's just trying to make their way through the galaxy, those players will have to pay in credits if they want to respawn. The flip side to all of that is if you're an Imperial or a Rebel, you get free respawns at your main faction. So if you end up getting all this heat and then you lose all your money, you keep dying, well, now you're out on funds. That's when you go over and enlist at the Mercenaries Guild. and then you go off to war for a bit, get a little change in your pocket before you can go back to your shenanigans in the game.
Nah, that's wild.
Yeah, it's just there's a big sandbox of like stuff to do, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like you have to have the same repetitive experience the whole time. I think that's the big thing that, you know, I'm very impressed you guys have been able to offer such a variety of experiences within your sandbox. Like, players can come in and there's really all kinds of characters that are valid. And I feel like even, you know, playing within and around these systems, there's also going to be emergent gameplay options that people point out and bring out that, you know, obviously we're not going to foresee in the scope of this podcast, but I'm excited to see how that continues to develop.
Yeah, especially giving players a little bit more freedom in how they want to run inside that game.
Well, so one of the things that I want to do, because we're coming up just a little over an hour, so if anybody in the chat has any questions, this would be a good time to submit them while we kind of go into the what's next thing. So you've obviously got your Bolivar event here, Chris, but you know, you alluded to the unnamed game. Do you have any indication of when and where that might be?
That is in Wisconsin at Action Sports. So we're taking the event back to Mauston again for next year to kind of build on that platform and that story that's being told. So
nice.
kind of timeline goes within the game. It's about 2-month time period, which passes from event to event. So there's a little bit of us being able to tweak some narratives of what has happened at the event or what is happening on the field or what's the kind of status or the culture there. But as we continue to look at the future, it's always like, okay, where else do we want to try this? Where else can we go? Where else will this kind of open world sandbox kind of land? And where else can we take it?
Yeah, and you can use your locations to create that continuity, use the different places and kind of create that whole an immersive
well, and then the
world.
different environments and styles. Yeah. Like I love my winter games. I think you should run a Hoth game in the Northeast.
Right? You know, the Battlefront Boulevard is like November 5th in the Midwest, so it's like there's a chance we could have an ice world for that, which will play in very well because the last time everyone was at Boulevard, it kind of got like struck from orbit from all these Star Destroyers that basically turn the planet into glass. So
you just have a nuclear winter.
Yeah, if there's a nuclear winter happening, I mean that's perfect. I don't really want that to be what's happening during that time of year, but if it happens, it happens, you know.
No, I love miserable weather for games. I feel like it'll be hard for all the technology you're trying to integrate, but it would be really cool.
Yeah, as we found out, -10 and airsoft guns don't really mix too well.
Yeah.
-10 in airsoft guns, -10 in chronos, -10 in drone batteries, -10 in people's just general motivation and love for life.
Yep.
Yeah, I want a Hoth game. I'm in.
Oh, all right. Well, I don't see any comments in the chat. So, you know, going once, going twice. If anyone's got any questions before we wrap up here. But Chris, in terms of, you know, hosting, you've got those next games coming up. But in terms of playing, where are you going to be at next?
So I'm going down to the Rock Airsoft. I'm going down there for their Rockiversary. So it's their anniversary game they put on every year. We're going to be tying in a couple of aspects from the Galactic Civil War series. So we're going to drag out a couple Juggernauts for them and have that enter the game at one point as like a fun surprise, except it's not a surprise if I'm saying it right now. But we're going to go down there. We'll have a table set up, kind of showing off what we're doing, playing some video in the background of what's the Galactic Civil War, because that's only a couple months away there. The fall game, there's the Tarkov at Action Sports Wisconsin. I'll be trying to get to that one and do my regular Chris, like we were talking about Chris at Action Sports Wisconsin. He's been an awesome partner for me because he kind of comes and let me sandbox either technology or different things or different gameplay aspects that I want to try out. And that was where I field tested a lot of the Juggernaut systems just to make sure everything was working there. So he's been awesome with that. So I'll drag out a couple of things I'm working on. to that event and do my regular bounty hunting at the Tarkov event, which is completely different aspect of the game, which is always fun to do. So I'm excited to do that.
I do want to go back and
like
now, really play the Tarkov event. The last time I was there, I was like splitting duties between promoting Incursion, and then I was like not feeling great that day. As it turns out, I just did not eat enough. So I need to go back there and actually play.
Watching you have to bounty hunt people though with that canister and whatnot was hilarious though. So that was fun to watch.
Yeah, so those are the two ones that are directly on my calendar before Battlefront Boulevard. But nice. I'm always looking. I'm always trying to maybe pick up another event here or there between those times to kind of fill the event and have fun. How about yourself? What are you guys doing?
Oh, man. Next game for me is this weekend. I've got all my stuff behind me. I'm all packing up for the Battle of Benghazi from Grimnir Tactical, Blue Mag Airsoft, and Zulu 24. That should be fun. Eric, are you going to Shally as well in November?
I am not. I will unfortunately be on a plane on Sunday for Vegas.
Oh, man.
Oh,
what a shame. You're going to Vegas.
Yeah, that sucks, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was really looking forward to Shally, though. I wanted to play Mutak so bad.
Yeah, my September is totally screwed with like weddings. Literally, I have like 3 weddings in September. But then in October, I don't know what. But then after Benghazi, my next big game is definitely Shally. So that's going to be an awesome Milsim West game. Force on Force at Mutak. It'll be super cool. I want to actually get my M4S system up and running. And my favorite thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get it ready to look exactly like an old school SFM4. So it's totally like Milsim nerd stuff, but it's going to be great. Someone actually has a question in here. Native Trooper asks, I got a question for everyone in general. Who wants to play airsoft games, walk-on, or otherwise in cosplay? And do you think it should be the norm? Because we all dress up in one way or another. As far as I'm concerned, walk-on airsoft games are a blank slate for whatever you want to do, right? Like, that's the point, is everyone's just walking on, and like, as long as everyone's playing by the same rules, the costuming does not matter. Like, wear your costume.
Yeah, especially if you're just dealing with, like what you're saying, walk-on gameplay where they're going to give you an armband for team identification anyway. Yeah. Like, wear what you're going to wear. Like, the people who really want to focus on like the full Milsim experience, they're going to go to those events. They're going to be playing at those events.
Yep.
And even a lot of those people, they may consider whatever you're wearing to be, oh, I would never wear something like that, or oh, what are you doing? Like, you're not taking this seriously. But I mean, it's airsoft, right? So, let them have their fun at when they're playing their big Milsims, and you're not going to run out there in your banana costume so much. So yeah, just go have fun. Wear what you want to wear.
We're all cosplay at some form or another inside this hobby. So.
I mean, most of the people I know who are really hardcore Milsim people call their impression kit a cosplay anyway. So I think I think more and more like the airsoft community is really on the same page with a lot of this.
But you should be using your walk-on games for anything. I mean, I've used it walk-on games to test a little bit of Milsim West kit. If you're going to use it to test your Mandalorian or any other cosplay things you're wearing to make sure it can hold up to all that movement, send it, do it. I mean, yeah, why not?
Yep.
Yeah, I want to see it more. I like cool costumes. They're neat.
Well, we've been so indoctrinated in the airsoft community to this to this Milsim military type play that I think it's time to see something different. It's time to see what Chris is doing with the 6mm Mandalorian and whatnot. It's in Omegas and stuff like that. It's time for that variety.
Yeah, I think more genres of airsoft game and airsoft play in general are a really good thing. Like there've been a couple of social media kerfuffles recently of people arguing back and forth about like oh, Airsoft shouldn't embrace a sci-fi aesthetic because it's built on milsim. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Tell that to all the people in Japan who invented the things. Like, get out of here. The total lack of self-awareness from some people is crazy. But that's a whole other topic for a whole other podcast. I think we're coming up to a good point to wrap up. But I'm going to give the last word to you, Chris.
All right. Well, thank you again, Eric, for having me on the show. I super appreciate you guys giving us a little shout out here to be able to talk about the event series. I'm a super huge fan of everything that you've done so far with what you guys are doing with your games, and that needs to get on my calendar for maybe the February one or whatever time frame for that. The Mandalorian outfit is surprisingly warm and keeps your clothes together. So that was actually the first time I rolled out my Mandalorian costume was in February, and I felt amazing. Everyone else was freezing, but I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. This is great. But yeah, thanks again for having me on the podcast, guys. November 4th through 5th down in Boulevard, Missouri is the Galactic Civil War series, and the May 4th and 5th game. Yeah, May 4th, Star Wars Day, Star Wars game is going to be out at Action Sports Wisconsin, so keep your eyes on that.
The last one you had at Action Sports, but I definitely want to make this one. So I'm going to try my damned hardest to actually be able to play the bounty hunter character that I put effort into making.
Do it.
Thanks again, guys.
No, of course. Thank you. And where can everybody find you if they're looking for more information?
Yeah. So 6mm Mandalorian, if you put that into your Google search thing, you're going to find me on YouTube. You're going to find me on Instagram. You can find more about the Galactic Civil War series at galactic-civil-war.com. That is our website for the event series. You can check out our rule sets, different videos on what we got going on there. You can also find our Facebook group where everything's sprouted out from at Galactic Airsoft Alliance on Facebook. That's kind of where all of us nerds got together to start forming the Galactic Civil War series. You can find me on Facebook too at 6mm Mandalorian as well.
Nice. Well, I want to thank those of you who tuned in live. I want to thank those of you who watch this later. And I want to tell all of you that you can find out more about us at www.gungamersproductions.com. I've been Eric. And we've been here with Chris, the 6mm Mandalorian. Always a treat to have this guy on the show. Thank you again for coming, and thank you for watching. We will catch you in the next video. Peace.